Ron Blake, welcome to the Conquering Everest podcast.
Hi, Brian. Happy, what is today?
Tuesday,
Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's recording this on a Tuesday. Um, we had a great pre-interview, I guess is what we call a good conversation a few weeks ago. And, there's a lot to unpack in your story, not only with the circumstances around what got you to where you are today, but some of the things you've been doing. I haven't met anybody like you that's kind of traveled around and done these type of things. So I'm looking forward to getting into your story, and so that especially so that our audience can hear about what's going on and what you've been through. So I'm going to let you go ahead and kick this off if you don't mind. Just introduce us to Ron's story.
Yeah. And I think the best way to do that, well, really, I'll get to the good stuff, meaning the happier stuff. But you have to start with the rough stuff. I mean, I wouldn't be on this journey if something bad didn't happen. So I'll get to that, and then we can start working toward the much better part of the story. But yeah, I've been on this, gosh, I think this journey now is it's approaching 2,200 consecutive days. But it all began, the journey actually began with a moment of laughter I had on a suicidal night almost 6 years ago. And I had been struggling with PTSD, depression from a trauma that happened a couple years before that suicidal night. That trauma, it occurred, I had been sleeping in my home in downtown Phoenix. I lived in a loft on the 7th floor in downtown. And on that night, 3 men came into my home. I was held down. I was raped. I was beaten. The guys almost killed me. And it was horrific what happened. There's a whole involvement with the police. My rape was categorically dismissed because I'm a gay man. We have documentation of that, sadly. It's not, sometimes people hear you say something like that and think, well, that's your opinion. No, I mean, there was documentation that, it wasn't taken seriously. So in a lot of ways, what happened to me that night was really like a double trauma. It's like, you're getting hit by one tidal wave, and then here comes another one to wipe you out. Because that night I called 911. I did what almost no rape survivors do, is at the moment it was happening, I called 911, and all of the police showed up with all the perpetrators there. It was a bloody crime scene. It's really heartbreaking. I mean, if it wasn't me and I was hearing this story, I would just be, gosh, I mean, it's tough. And so I'm just letting people know, like, the depths of what I went through. So sometimes when people hear that, if they've never been through something like that, then hopefully they can feel it through me and understand what a lot of us trauma survivors, what we'll go through. So that's what happened to me. And over the years, I had 7 people there that night, 4 police officers, 3 perpetrators, and they all tell you it didn't happen. And it happened. And that's the struggle with trauma is in this situation that, you start doubting yourself, thinking, well, if 7 people showed up there and said this didn't happen, then did it really happen? And you start doubting yourself. And that's really tough. And then over the years, there's been gaslighting. I have a team of people. I'm just making sure I can say certain things, but there's a team of people working with me, and we hope someday to have justice. But more importantly, I'll get back to this journey. So then I had struggled with the PTSD for a couple of years. I would have nightmares. And finally, on that November 2nd of 2015, I woke up from what I tell people was just yet another nightmare. And on that night, I just said, I'm done. It's like I go back to that tidal wave reference that, let's say you're out at sea and your ship capsizes and you just get, day after day, these waves keep hitting you. And at some point in time, you just say, let the next one just take me. I want to be done with this pain. And that's what happened on that night in November, 6 years ago. I was wiped out. I mean, when you wake up and you can't tell the difference between your nightmares and your reality, you're done. You know, and
Yeah.
that's, I wrote a story for some of my editors about that a couple of Halloweens ago. A lot of people didn't even know that what I was writing was actually based upon a true story, because I had my editors and I had readers saying, wow, that was a horrifying story. That's great that you were able to be so creative. Well, what I did is I actually took that experience of not being able to differentiate between your nightmares and reality, and I turned it into that story. And I shifted it around a little bit so people didn't know specifically it was a rape, but it was based upon that. And so the good part of that is I was able to take something and turn it into like a Stephen King moment to entertain people. And I feel like, to me, if I can do that, or other trauma survivors, if we're able to take our traumas and turn it into something that can be like entertainment, meaning it's just, it could be used in a good fashion. So a lot of people are never even told what that story was based on. And it's okay. I mean, because I'm able to turn it into art. And so it allows me that ability to find a way to keep going. But yes. And so that spark, that moment, that this is where the happy stuff hopefully starts, is on that night. As I sat there, I got all my pills out. I was going to take my life. I put the pills on my lap. But there was something that stopped me. I looked at the television and it was on, and it shouldn't have been on. Every night I'd set the timer, the television would go off. And so on this night, when I woke up, I had the water bottle, I had all those pills ready. And I remember glancing at the TV and I thought, that's unusual. Like, that should have gone off. And there was this show, it was called The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, and it was playing. He's a comedy guy, if people don't know the show. And something made me laugh at that moment. And I remember just pausing the show, and I sat there for a while. That moment was that was it. It stopped me from taking my life. I leave it up to everybody to decide. Was that God? Was that a higher power? Was that the universe? Was that Allah? What stopped me? Like, why would that television of all nights, why would that be the night it doesn't go off? And it happens to be on this show, and it happens to be something that makes me laugh. Everything had to be going in the right direction for that moment to exist. And I just felt this powerful, I told people, I actually saw myself. Then you start telling people things like this and they think you're crazy. Well, I really don't care, but I saw myself, and I believe it was in the future, sitting next to Stephen Colbert. I had this vision, and I just thought, this is where I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to tell my story. I'm going to tell what happened this night, and I'm not going to stay quiet about what happened to me anymore, because that's what was killing me. So anyway, that's the happy moment, the moment of esperanza, the moment of hope that happened. So I'll shut up for a minute, Brian. And if you want to ask me any questions or redirect me, I just wanted to get you guys from taking you from the bad stuff to that spark of hope, and that started the journey.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions for you, but I definitely can feel where you're coming from. Although my circumstances in life are different, but to have this moment, and then everybody around you trying to convince you that it's not really as bad as you think it is, or it didn't exist. Because I've had those moments in my life where it was like, I felt like I was legitimately going crazy because everybody was discounting my feelings or my story. So it's like a double whammy for you. Of all things, is this night this terrible thing is happening, and then the people that are supposed to protect you and help you don't live up to their their end of the bargain. So you kind of suffered in silence, it sounds like, for a while. You decided to be vulnerable. You let your story out, although you kind of phrased it so it was more of it was told, while true story, it was told in a way that people could absorb it and not shy away from the content. And then this moment when you watched, the TV's on, So what inspiration at that point? You saw yourself with Stephen Colbert. So what was next on your mind? Like, were you able to relax and sleep, or were you just all of a sudden filled with these ideas or thoughts? Like, what happened for you then?
That night I slept. I ended up going back to bed. I don't know exactly if it was 10 minutes, 20 minutes, but I remember I slept well that night. It's in some ways, I guess, it just felt like a big weight was lifted.
Yeah.
But I think more importantly, it was just that I felt like there was a way out, like that
Mm-hmm.
moment of hope. Um, it like there's a movie called Billy Elliot from years ago, probably 20 years
Yeah.
ago. A really good movie if nobody's ever seen it. But this kid, and it reminded me of this moment where this kid, Billy Elliot, he's like a 10 or 11-year-old kid, grows up in a very hard scrabble area of England, like coal mining area. And it's just a rough area. The kid's lost his mom. The family's struggling. And this kid turns out he wants to be a ballet dancer. He's really good too. And like, this is not where you like find ballet dancers coming. And especially from this little kid, but he eventually goes to like London to do an audition, and he's, the blue collar hard scrabble kid. He doesn't fit in with the rest of the kids. And I remember at the interview, they were going to dismiss him, because he doesn't fit. He was saying all the wrong things. And finally, at the end, one of the people in the panel, they look at Billy and they said, "What is it like to dance?" And Billy Elliot looks at them, and, just the blue collar kid that he is, he just speaks his mind. And it wasn't rehearsed. He just said, "I don't know." He said, "It's kind of like electricity." And you see all the heads at the table looking up at him, because at that point they knew, like, wow, we have this kid. He's a diamond in the rough, and for him to explain that it's electricity, it really captivated them. And the reason I went into that long introduction about that movie is because that really was my story. Like, there was this moment, it was like this electricity that went through me. And it's just, in a lot of ways, it's hard to put in. And I grew up a very blue collar guy, South Chicago area, steel mills. So in some ways, Billy Elliot and I had, there wasn't anywhere near the poverty that Billy Elliot's family had, but I still grew up in a hard scrabble blue collar area. So I related to that. And then especially what I was going through with this trauma, Billy Elliot was also going through a lot of trauma, losing his mother and his parents. His father was on strike. And, so anyway, there were a lot of parallels. But if people see that, I think we can all relate to that moment of electricity, that spark that just happens. And, I feel like I've got a $20,000 vocabulary, but sometimes you just have to be reduced to like a moment like that. And again, that's what caught the panel. And so when I've been interviewed sometimes by some media people and they ask me about that, I just said, it's just, unless you've been through it, when that spark happens, you just grab onto it. It's like grabbing onto a comet and you ride it because it's taking you somewhere. So it was really positive, but I did sleep well that night. I had no idea how I'm going to get to the show. I just knew, like, I saw this vision, like I'm supposed to get on this show. I'm supposed to tell my story. Something's connected. So when I woke up the next day, I remember I just did what I'm supposed to do, because in a lot of ways I shouldn't have lived to that next day.
Right.
So it was, when I thought about it and I woke up, I'm like, gosh, I have a day. Like, I know some people look at that and think, oh God, I woke up, I have to go to work today. I woke up and just thought, I get another day. And I don't know if people can truly appreciate that. So I had breakfast, and then I thought, well, I'm supposed to keep going. So I was out of paper. I ended up going to the nearby Staples store to buy paper for the computer. And when I was there, I remember for some reason, I ended up in front of these giant foam poster boards. And there was a lady that came by from Staples, and she just said, "Can I help you?" I looked at these boards and said, "Do you have more of these in the back in like the warehouse?" And she said, "Let me go check." So she walked around, and I did a TEDx talk. If your listeners know what, I know not everybody knows what those are, but they're TEDx talks. So people can look it up if they don't. But I did
We'll
one of
put a
those.
link.
And I shared what happened at that moment. I said, the lady went to go look, and then she came back into the aisle and said, "How many of those boards do you want?" Well, I never said I wanted any. I was just, there was this curiosity inside me. Like, does she have 50 of them? Does she have 30? And I think I was getting this vision of like what they would all look like together. And that was the moment. People say, was there an aha moment? That was the moment. I just said, I'm going to take everything you got. So if she had 10, she had 50, I was taking all of them. And then I ended up that day buying these Sharpie markers. That day it was a 12 pack. And I just had this vision, like, I'm going to go out every day. I think the way I'm supposed to get to the show is learn how to talk about what happened to me, go talk to strangers every day. It's going to help me get out of the house. It's going to help me engage with people, which I wasn't doing. I was isolating. It was going to help me tell my story. And then I was going to get support, like just go up to somebody, say, hey, after I tell you quickly what happened to me, can you confirm that I talked to you, that I'm trying to get to the late show? And then I thought, oh, they'll sign their names or put good luck. And people did. But as time went on over all these 6 years, now I've met 32,071 strangers all over Mexico, the United States. And they've signed like stories. People didn't just put their names. They actually started opening up to me. It's incredible. So they've put all these stories on 494 giant foam poster boards and 27. And I moved up to 27 Sharpie colors now. So that day I bought a 12 pack, and now I found that Sharpie has just so many different colors. And that's going to come with me to the late show someday, all that.
Out of curiosity, how many foam boards did you walk out with that day?
That day, if I remember right, I thought it was 8, 8 or 9. It wasn't 50.
Okay.
But I did have a bunch to me, and I didn't know. I thought, do I need one board? Do I need 10 boards? I didn't know. All I knew is at that moment, it seemed like that was the moment when I gave the TEDx talk. I said, the night before was the moment that kept me going. But that was the means, like, okay, this is how I'm going to do this journey. And it's really like the book, The Alchemist. A lot of people would talk about that in the journey. And I was given that book by somebody on the journey. So if anybody has ever heard of the book, The Alchemist, or hasn't heard of it, go look it up. It's a really good
read
book.
That book.
But it's pretty similar to the journey I've been on.
So that day, and so you walked out with 10 boards, and now you have, how many boards have you collected with signatures and stories? I'm sure are you past that number at this point?
Oh yeah.
You just uncountable.
I have a storage area, U-Haul storage area in downtown Phoenix, and I told people, I said, these boards aren't doing anybody any good in that storage area. So I'm hoping somebody from the late show comes along and says, bring them all here. We want to hear this story. Because, but I have 494 giant foam poster boards now that are just completely filled out. I've been in cities like Boston, Miami, San Diego, Denver, even smaller cities like Chadron State College in the Panhandle of Nebraska. Maybe 8,000 people in Chadron, Nebraska, but they brought me in there to speak to students. So they're not always like major cities. They're suburban areas. They're rural areas. I've been in Wyoming. There's a whole powerful story, what happened in Wyoming. There are powerful stories everywhere. When you're meeting people, you just, we think that movies and art are where it's all at, but movies and art are often based upon us, humans. Right. And so that's where, we get the inspiration for all this stuff. But in this case, I've captured, I guess if I use the Billy Elliot metaphor, I've captured 32,071 moments of electricity. Because all these people, they share what's energized them or what they want to use to energize me and others. So it's something, I get it. People look at me and say, isn't your goal to get on the Late Show? Yeah. But all these other things have happened along the way, so I'm not going to discount it. Like you and me sitting right here, Brian. In some ways, I guess, this wasn't part of the plan, but here we are, me and you.
Yeah, because both
Arizona, Illinois, talking with each other.
right there, because and what's really fascinating in my mind is you had your day you weren't supposed to see the next day, and I had that same moment in my life where it was like, I was a split second away from not having another day. But it sounds like what I'm hearing is before that moment, before the that moment in time, you had shared your story, but you shared it in kind of a third party capacity, made it more of a story. And then what happened after that moment of clarity, or that moment of electricity, that is when you owned your story. Would you say that's correct? Like you really owned it and said, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to be vulnerable. And is that a true statement for you? Like, did you feel like you took ownership of it at that point?
Yeah, I mean, that day at Staples, I just that was what I was going to do.
Yeah.
And I think, had I talked to 20 people about my plans of what I was going to do and go on this journey, to be honest with you, I think most people would have said, why? You had a moment, embrace that moment. But a lot of times we don't look at these great opportunities that come along. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that was the part where I owned it and just said, you're right. And I just said, this is what I'm going to do. And to be honest, I've had criticisms from people over the last 5-6 years. People will tell me, oh, I'm happy that you're alive. But, a lot of people want me to go out and get a 9-to-5 job. Well, what people forget, they don't always realize, this still is a journey of recovery for me. I still go through physical therapy to this day. Like, those guys screwed me up so badly. It wasn't just with the PTSD. I still had a physical therapist. I had a gym with, thankfully, like in Scottsdale, Arizona, there was a gym, EOS Fitness, and they donated 10 sessions, and they said they wanted to be a part of helping me get back to where I need to be. This was just this past, 6 months ago. And I've had to work really hard because I had some issues where with my physical health, I take some steps back and then I have to move forward and figure it out. So, I mean, yeah, this is my journey. I do own it. And I don't want people, I really believe survivors of traumas, they don't want people to feel sorry for them. What survivors, or like you were explaining, Brian, like you went through something difficult.
Mm-hmm.
The hope is that people will listen to you, and I my guess, and I'm going to be probably 100% certain with you too, that, you just want people to understand. There's a difference between wanting people to feel sorry for you or just understand you. If they understand what you've been through, now they can work with you. Now they can assist you, and there's still, when I'm being gaslighted by these guys that did this to me, or the police failed to open up that new investigation to, I have so much abundance of evidence. I mean, I won't go too deep into that because, like I said, there's a whole team working with me on that. But those are the things that you just want somebody to say, just listen to me, understand what I've been through, because then you can walk in my shoes and you can understand this much better. But I do own it. And I feel like if people look over the last 6 years at how much success I've had, I mean, if I end up dying tonight, I mean, whenever, if I die soon, I feel like I would have accomplished so much more. I leave by, because these boards, a bunch of art folks told me it's called social practice artwork. So now I leave behind this massive collective story of hope and social practice artwork. There's been a documentary out that has more to do with the students at this university that followed me for 3 months, but they were nominated for an Emmy Award, and they shared the initial parts of the journey I was on. So now you've got that, you got a TEDx talk. I've spoken all over the country at universities. And so, when you do all these things, you're leaving a huge impact. So I feel like I would rather die penniless and have left behind all of this as the legacy of my life. So as you said, I own this. And I think maybe that's something good, Brian, that you can share with your listeners, is find what you own in your life. I've never put it in those direct words, but we each have the ability to, we can't go back and change what's happened to us, but we can own the moment, and each moment builds and builds and builds until it leaves a legacy.
Well, and yeah, and just to add to that, when it comes to when I talk about owning our stories, um, you explain like one side of it that I didn't consider in the past, but you had talked about we don't want people to feel sorry for us. We want people to understand what we've gone through, understand our story and what it's meant to us. And on the flip side of that coin, and I think that's 100% true. But then also the unmeasurable side to that is how our stories, once we take ownership of them, once we're vulnerable and we put it out there, you just don't know how many lives you've changed simply because somebody's aha moment may have come when they were walking down the street and they saw this guy with these boards telling his story, and then they finally own their story on your, it's like it's just such an intricate weaving of lives that, Stephen Colbert was what got you through another day. And I would say out of all the people you've met, at least one had another day because of you and your story and your willingness to share. So, I think that is, if this was the end of, for some reason there was no tomorrow for you, well, your tomorrow is going to live on through others. So I think that's what I love about your story when we talked about this. And I'm like, wow, something simple, something small that, just as having somebody sign a board may seem so insignificant to some, but yet others, it's such a powerful moment. The TED Talk, that was, had you started the mission of what did you call it? Social art?
Social practice artwork, it's called.
Were you, social practice artwork, were you engaged in that when the TED Talk came about, or like what's the timing of that in relation to each other?
The timing of that is just, I guess, sort of luck. I walked into a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix, probably a block from where I was living. And I met this guy and gal. They were boyfriend, girlfriend at one of the universities in Phoenix. And they said, "Can we nominate you for a TEDx talk?" Well, I didn't really know what TEDx talks were. Like, as I said, not everybody's going to know what those are. I think a lot of people have heard of them. But I was pretty ignorant about, like, what are these things? Yeah. I didn't know the ins and outs of it. So I said, sure. They explained some of it to me. And then they ended up having a committee, and they said, they wanted me to speak. I think if there was one thing I could look at maybe differently from the TEDx talk is that what I've learned over the last couple of years is you don't want it to just be a personal story. Those are powerful for TEDx, but what you want is a very clear idea. And then you can wrap it with a personal story like I had. So it was a very emotional story, very personal. I thought the idea was clear, but as I look back, I think I could have made more clarification. But really the tenor of the TEDx was, it's about people. I think a lot of times we are always looking for the next medicine. We're always, we're looking for something else, maybe a certain type of therapy, but what we're missing is people are all around us. And that was the tenor of what I was trying to put out there, is that, well, these people, and through their Sharpie markers, they're helping me save my life. And it wasn't just about me. It was about an example of what people could do. But if I could do a better job of clarifying, I would have done that. Because now that I understand, I even applied for another TEDx talk, another aspect of this journey that I think could be incredibly powerful as an idea. So we'll see what comes from that. But that was probably, 1.5 years into the journey when I met those two students. But yes, I had been doing the social practice artwork because every day I was meeting strangers and they were putting things on these boards. They were actually the medium of the artwork is actually the interaction you're having with all these people. And so I forget exactly where I was at, where somebody said, you know, you're creating artwork. It looks pretty. It looks nice. You got a lot of colorful stuff on these boards. But it's really cool when somebody in the art world actually identifies it as art, you know, and and I've had 7 art exhibits with these boards. So that, let's hope someday there will be in a permanent exhibit, because they're not going to do anybody any good if they sit in a U-Haul storage area for the next 200 years.
Yeah.
They won't.
How did you come about that moment of sharing your story? And the question, so earlier today, I had an opportunity to speak with some high school kids, and we were talking about mental illness. And one of the questions I received was, how do you find the courage or the confidence to share your story? And, I guess I'm going to pose that question to you now. That moment, that first moment that you shared your story in complete vulnerability with complete strangers, what was that like for you leading up to that moment? And then how did you go about? Did you just decide, I'm going to go here and I'm going to stand on the street and I'm going to talk to folks? Or what was that like for you?
It's sort of cool too, the way you pose that question at me, Brian, is like, you almost sound like a reporter in a good way. Like, I'm not trying to say that, because I know sometimes people think of journalists and reporters in a bad way now, but I say that in a good way. And there's a tie-in to the first person I ever walked up to. His name is Josh Bowling. And it was at the Arizona State University, their downtown Phoenix campus, which was only a couple blocks from my home at that time. And I walk up to this guy, Josh Bowling. He was a second-year student in the Cronkite Journalism School. And they have I think it's the 4th best journalism school in the country. So that's why I tied you in. It sounded like you were being a journalist there, bringing up the question, like, what was it like? And I feel like to this day, Josh could probably ask me. He's now a journalist with the Arizona Republic, the largest newspaper in Arizona, which is also close to where I live in downtown Phoenix. But it was so cool that we've actually become friends, me and Josh. And then he got married a couple years ago. But I met his wife, Carly, on the journey too. And I think it was her friend when I was at the coffee shop said, wouldn't it be cool if you could go back and meet the first person? And I said, oh, I know him. And I said, it was Josh. And she said, you're kidding. She said, that's my fiance. So it's a small world that we're in. And she's also, she graduated from Arizona State University. But that first moment, I mean, it took me 3 attempts to get out of my home that day, because I kept coming up with excuses, because I started thinking, like, to be honest, like the rest of the world. And when you do that, you're allowing everybody else to determine your future. And so there was a moment I'd look at those students and is it Champaign-Urbana? I forget if you're Bloomington Normal or Champaign.
I'm in Bloomington, but yeah, Champaign's just right down the road. Yeah.
But in Bloomington, like when you were talking to those students and, like, how do you go out and be vulnerable? For me, really what I did is I didn't think like the rest of the world, because I think so many things we will not do because we allow societal norms to dictate what we're going to do. And like, to be honest, Brian, like somebody like, what am I doing? I'm going out and walking up to strangers and telling them a story and trying to get on some TV show. I mean, that sounds like true madness. But unless I forget about the rest of the world and say, this is my journey, you know what? And I'm going to figure out how best to save my life. And if I'm going to help other people doing it, then that's the best thing possible. And so I would tell those students in Bloomington, forget about what the rest of the world says. Oh, and I got a good movie reference too, because if you remember, hopefully your listeners remember this, the movie Dead Poet Society with Robin Williams. There's a moment where one of the students is right in front of Robin Williams, and Robin Williams says, tell me what it feels like. What did this poem feel like? And he starts talking and all the classmates are laughing. And he says, forget them. Look at me. Focus with me. What did it feel like? And what Robin Williams' character is doing at that moment in the movie is he's saying, ignore the rest of the world. Just tell me what it feels like, just from pure emotion. And it's so powerful. And I really hope people go back and maybe Google that part and or put it on YouTube and pull it up. That's what I would tell those students in Bloomington is just forget about the world and look at Robin Williams and just tell him what you feel and what do you want to do with your life. And it may sound stupid, it may not, but and actually in that part of the movie, those other classmates, when that kid got out what he wanted to say and what that poem meant, they were like mesmerized because they couldn't believe what came out of this guy when he just let go of everything and just, he was vulnerable. So yeah, it was powerful. I like sharing movie moments because I feel like it's something we can all connect with, you know?
Right.
Like if your listeners haven't seen it, they can go and find it on YouTube, that moment I'm describing.
What was your initial motivation for becoming vulnerable and sharing your story? Like it maybe, I don't know if it's something totally different now, but that first, when you finally got out of the house and you said, I'm going to go do this, what were you hoping to get from that?
To be honest, like on this whole journey, there were so many moments that I didn't know what I was going to get out of things.
It was just kind of a feeling that was there.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is, did you just know you have to go on this journey? Because if I stay where I'm at, I'm not going to make it. And then let me bring in another movie reference. If I'm giving you too many movie references,
no, have at it.
Pants. But all right, look at the movie with Tom Hanks, Castaway.
Yeah,
like Tom Hanks toward the end of the movie, he has everything he needs on that island. He's stuck. He has food. He's got water. He's got fire. He's got shelter. There's one thing he's missing. He doesn't have companionship. And he says to himself, I can't just sit here. So when you ask me like the motivation or what drove me to go, I knew I couldn't stay where I was at, because if I stayed where I was at, I wasn't going to make it. Because in that sense, there was something missing in my life. I very similarly, like Tom Hanks in that movie, I needed companionship. I needed to be not isolated. And so I just told myself that was the motivation. And I know Tom Hanks, I can't remember what the heck his name was in the movie, but it was dangerous. I mean, I'll ruin it for some people, but well, maybe I shouldn't, because there might be a younger generation that's never seen it. But he ventures out. It was dangerous, and you have to make that decision. You know, if you stay where you're at. If I stayed where I was at, I wasn't going to make it.
Yeah. And
I know Tom Hanks at some point, you know, if he'd have gotten sick, you know, yeah, he would have needed medicine and he would have died that way. So I think that's a really good movie reference too, is that it's a metaphor for that. That's our motivation. You know, there's a better life. And if you stay where you're at, then you're stuck. But if you venture forward, even if you make mistakes, you got a shot. And I look at me now. I mean, I'm not taking any pain medicine. I used to take pain meds all the time for the physical pain. I took prescription sleeping pills. I had become dependent. You can't become addicted to sleeping pills prescription, but I became dependent and it was horrible. I'm off. I think it's been 4.5 years. I've been off of every pill prescription, pain or sleeping. That has not been easy, but it's this journey that allowed me to find my way. And to be honest, like sometimes people think I had this master plan. No, I mean, in some ways you just go out, you meet people and you figure it out each day. And I think you're probably that. Well, I'm going to guess you're probably that way too, is you know,
you just listen for you listen for the whispers. I like to call them whispers that creep into your mind that you're like, I need to do this. And, you know, talking about Castaway and Tom Hanks, I mean, I think we're all conditioned as humans to need connection, to have those relationships, you know, whether they're, you know, just friendships, more than friendships, whatever. We need that connection. That's kind of part of what motivates us and drives us to keep doing what we're doing. Considering what you went through, and the violence and the trauma from it, and even some of the trauma that you still have to deal with today until justice gets served. But then the good side of it, the connections you have made, the ability to tell your story and be completely vulnerable. What is it like for you with connection now, with relationships now? Do you have, because I'm thinking if this was me, I don't know if I'd be able to trust a person again. Like I would be terrified. And I imagine you've gone through some of that, but where are you at today with your ability to connect, trust, have faith?
Well, and I don't think I shared, I think I shared this with you when we talked before the show, but I don't think I shared this with your listeners. One of the 3 people that did this to me and came into the home that night had been a domestic partner of mine for almost a decade. So this was also domestic violence. Like people throw words around a lot in our lifetime, and sometimes words lose their effectiveness because we become desensitized. We watch movies, we can pull up anything we want on Google, anything. And so when I say this word I'm going to share with you, it takes on a whole new meaning when you actually experience it. But the word is betrayal. And if you look at in our history, and whether, some people, if I bring up the Bible, people will say, well, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in a higher power. Well, then the Bible is still literature. You know what I'm saying? It's like somebody can look at that and say it is a piece of literature. So in that sense, we can all relate to that. So in the Bible, who was it? Judas. He betrayed Jesus. A huge betrayal. And then you look at, was it Shakespeare with Julius Caesar, Brutus? There's 2 major pieces of literature, and they both are dealing at some point with betrayal. And again, if I put the word betrayal out, people like, oh yeah, and they keep going with their life. And it's like, yeah, until it happens to you, you'll never truly understand the actual power of that word. And I wrote a story called Dos Palabras, 2 words, for my editors a couple years back. And the basis was I was sharing about domestic violence. I started it off and it says, what did it say? It is love. And then it morphs. And at the end, it says it is betrayal. So it goes from love to betrayal. And you see it gently morphing into that. As a writer, I've written a couple hundred pieces for editors over the years. To me, that's always going to be one of the most powerful pieces I've ever created. And it's because I took people on this journey to be there that night of the trauma, and to have the person that was going to be with you for the rest of your life do this to you. And it didn't matter that he was drunk or on drugs, and all the guys were. I'm always going to remember that. And so when you ask me about being able to trust people again, I have a difficult time. And I think that that's one of the things that this journey's been helping me, because I'm learning how to talk to people. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single person I meet I can immediately trust. I've become friends with some of the people in the journey. It's opened some doors up for me. It's a process. I mean, so yeah, betrayal. Gosh, I mean, like I said, as great as Google is, it also desensitizes us a lot of times. And sometimes there's a beauty to just sitting back and looking at certain words in our life, and like even looking at the word trauma or looking at the word recovery. They don't always have to be sad words, but I just hate that sometimes things lose their effectiveness because of the abundance of them in the world. But yes, it will always probably be a difficult time for me to trust people, but I feel like I'm moving in the right direction because I'm trying. And I do every day.
That's one foot in front of the other will get you where you want to go. Well, no doubt somebody's listening to this podcast and you're feeling a connection with you. So I want to give you an opportunity to just, how can the world connect with you? What's next for you? I mean, we're in this COVID world now where, getting together face to face isn't always real easy, but websites, books, like, if somebody wants to reach out and learn more about your story, learn more about you and what you're doing, how should we direct them?
Well, and something too, I want to say before, like how they could reach out to me would be, if somebody's going through something difficult, I've heard people say before, somebody will come up to them and say, I'm struggling really badly, or somebody will be on Facebook or Instagram and somebody puts a call to help out there and says, I'm struggling today. I lost my dad, my wife, in the last couple of months, I'm struggling. And I see people, friends, that will sit there and say, oh, here's the suicide hotline. To be honest, Brian, that makes me want to cringe. Like I do cringe when I see that, because here's the thing. I know people are going to say, well, they're trying to help. My goodness gracious. You want to help, then you help. Don't hand it off to somebody else. The greatest person, like if you know somebody, it's like when there's a funeral, people go, oh, I don't want to go because I don't know what to say to the people who, the survivors of this person that died. Just say something. Like, even if you screw up and say all the wrong things, you're still going to be there for that person or those people. And so if you see one of your friends or coworkers or neighbors or whoever, and they're struggling, pick up the phone, call them, go to their house. Don't just give them a suicide hotline number. I get it. It's better than nothing. But the thing is, like, I feel like we're always trying to pawn it off on somebody else, going, you're somebody else's problem. Oh, thank goodness I gave them the 800 number. Please, take it, call them. And because if that person ends up dying, is it going to be your fault? Well, no, but I mean, could you have done something to help? Yes. I mean, and, I want people to start not feeling like they have to say every exact word correctly, or they have to go to a therapist to say, well, I have to learn from a therapist what words I should or should not say. Can I give one more movie reference?
Yeah, go for it.
Please, and if people haven't seen this is an old movie. It's called Steel Magnolias. It's, gosh, it must be 35 years old, but it had like some major A-listers, Dolly Parton, Olympia Dukakis, Julia Roberts, Sally Field. I think there were 2 or 3 other major, so it was a major film. But what happens is Sally Field, her daughter, Julia Roberts, dies. And she's young, and it's just a shock to everybody in the movie. But there's this famous graveyard scene where nobody knows what to say to Sally Field's character. I mean, she just lost her young daughter, and her daughter just had a baby. And Sally Field's character is screaming, and she's in, it's after the service, and she's just yelling in this graveyard, and her 5 friends, best friends, are around her, and they don't know what to say. But what happens is they say something, and they say all the wrong things. It's a crazy moment because you have to see it. It's really profound. But there is an example of they didn't know what to do, but they started talking. And you know what? In that scene, like 1 or 2 minutes in, after they say all the wrong things, they actually get Sally Fields laughing. And they have this lighthearted moment in this graveyard after she's just tragically lost her daughter. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Things work its way out. And she was just happy that they were taking the time to show they cared, even though they did it the craziest possible way and did all the wrong things. It worked because she knew they cared. Right. And that's what I can't emphasize that enough, that, don't be selfish if you're out there and think, well, I don't know what to say. To me, that's selfish. It's, figure out something to say, because if that person's gone, you're going to stand over their casket and you're going to find every word to say to them when they're dead. So figure it out when they're alive. Right. You can help a lot of us struggling. So anyway, I don't want to keep beating that to a dead pulp.
No. And I would just like to add to that too, as somebody that has gone through depression and had those moments and those real dark moments, Yeah, I would have given anything on some of those nights just for somebody to be sitting next to me at 3 a.m. when I'm a wreck and just telling me, I'm here. You're not alone. It's going to be okay. Like, you don't even have, they wouldn't even have to say anything. Just having somebody there and knowing that I wasn't alone in the struggle would have been, what to me would have meant the world. So, yeah, I totally agree. Say something. That's a great, that's just a great quote. Say something. No,
Yeah.
yeah.
No,
Don't
I think
dismiss it. Don't hand it off to somebody else. Be a friend. Be somebody that cares, and just, hey, I'm here for you. Let me know what you need.
yeah, and I think there was a song, I can't remember who sang it, very emotional song. It says, "Say something, I'm giving up on you." I'm sure if
Mm,
somebody Googles the lyrics, um, but it really is, you got to say something. And then who was the guy? John Mayer. He did a song that says, "Say what you need to say. Say what you need to say." So if somebody looks up that and they see it, it's incredibly, wow. It's just, it's this moment. So again, hopefully these movie references, these song references, and you telling your story just now, Brian,
mhm.
like 3 a.m, here you are. You'd have done anything to have somebody there. So, I mean, I'm glad you said that, because so hopefully somebody listening is going to say, yeah, and say, I do probably have buddies that are struggling. And, you know, even just if you call somebody and say, sometimes if you tell somebody, hey, I'm there for you, go a step further and just say, hey, man, I'm going to stop by at 8 tomorrow night. Set a
Yeah,
specific time and say, I'm going to stop by. I just want to drop off. I know you love burgers, so I'm going to drop off your favorite Whopper or your Big Mac. And even if it's during the pandemic, I said, you could always ring somebody's bell, set it on their doormat, step back 6 feet and say, hey, I just wanted to bring you your McDonald's or your M&Ms. I like cookies. So if somebody would have brought me chocolate chip cookies, that would have been exciting. Or just say, hey, I'm calling you at this time tomorrow. Be ready. I have something to tell you. So be specific, or send a letter to somebody. I was really good over the last couple of years of sending out personalized letters to my buddies to connect me to the world, especially during the pandemic, because I couldn't meet people face to face like I had been. So
mhm.
there are so many ways that you can make a doggone difference. Yeah. So I hope people hear what you just said about the 3 a.m. Because there are times that somebody could even say, hey, I actually had a friend that said to me, he knew I was going to be alone for, I think, about a week. This was about 2 years ago. And he said, I'm going to come over and stay the night with you. And some
Mm,
people think, oh, was it like in a sexual? No, no, no. It was, he said, I want to just make sure you're okay. And he stayed the night. And it was also, before that, I had gone through a car accident, had a traumatic brain injury, as though my journey wasn't tough enough.
yeah.
So he knew I was struggling, and he said, I want to be there because I know, a couple weeks after the car accident, things got a little rough. So he stayed with me. And there were some other friends that did the same thing. So that's powerful. So hopefully, like those 3 a.m. moments could be attended to. So I'm glad you brought that up. That is, I really hope people listen to what you just said there about that.
Thank you. So to get a hold of, to learn more about you, your journey, what's next, how would somebody, beyond the TED Talk and whatnot, how would they learn more about your journey and what's coming up?
Well, I mean, if somebody goes to Instagram, it's called Blake Late Show on there. Just my name's Blake and trying to get on the Late Show. So yeah, if you went to
Okay.
Blake Late Show on Instagram, I've over the last year and a half, especially, I've tried to do videos that like 60-second videos, really
Hmm.
uplifting, tons of pictures, like 1,600 photos with just probably about 5,000 people I've met on the journey where we hold up the boards. So
Right.
what's powerful about that Instagram, you get to see all these people I met. Just probably about 1 out of every 6 people I met is in a photo with me. It just gives you it's pretty cool. I'll leave it at that, and I'll let people
Okay.
see. There's also been, that documentary. It's called the Blake Project. It's on YouTube. Those
Okay.
students did well. They must have done a good job. They got nominated for that Emmy. So it's about 26 minutes long. And I got something exciting to share with people. And I'll probably be sharing this on Instagram On Facebook, it's Blake Late Show too. These, I don't know how many there are, maybe a dozen singers from America's Got Talent, that show on NBC. They just contacted me last week and said they've begun working on the song. They're going to create an uplifting song about this journey I've been on. And they said the demo should be ready in a few weeks. So I think that's going to be really cool, because we were discussing like some movie references and song references. Gosh, Brian, I think this song they're going to do is going to really impact people, because I didn't want it to be sad. So I'm really excited about that. I hope people check back over the next month or two to see, because I will be putting something about when that song is released. And then there are some filmmakers that are going to be doing a feature-length documentary about this story. Not just me taking back my life, but also the pursuit of justice. So a group of filmmakers are putting together the funding. I think there are going to be a lot of powerful things that are going to come here. And it's just because I'm connecting with a lot of people. We're putting this together, like in Spanish, juntos, together. And so, yeah, but if people want to start by some of that stuff, or go to blakelateshow.com, there are like a lot of like news stories that we share. Again, if it's just me sharing my story, people are going to get bored with that pretty quickly. I hope people look at all the references I gave, because there are takeaways for people. Again, the pictures, the videos. This story really isn't about me. It's about like a collection of people coming together. And I think people are going to see that, and they're going to pick and choose the things that can help them, right, or just make them happy in life. So, check it out.
You never know.
See what you guys know. Yeah.
And if anybody out there's listening and you've got a direct line to Stephen Colbert, please go ahead and send him the link to this this podcast and let him know. We'll see if we can't get you on that show, because I think you would reach so many more people with your story and effort. But Ron, you've been you got me a question. You said your name Blake. Is it Ron or Blake, or Ron's good?
A lot of times people, I have two first names. People usually call me Blake. It sort of stuck in college and high school. Everybody called me by my last name. So it's just a lot more people call me Blake than they call me Ron. And then when I go around with those boards, it says Blake Late Show. So everybody just assumes my name is Blake. So Blake. I answer to both. When I'm with all my family, I got to go by Ron because we're all Blake. But Blake works.
Well, I just regardless whether you want to call him Ron or Blake, you've been an inspiration to me. I'm sure you're going to be an inspiration to everybody that listens to the show. Just being able to do what you've done after going through what you went through. So I appreciate your time, and so glad you chose to be on this show. And I hope we get to talk more in the future and keep this journey alive for you. So
sounds good. Well, reach out to me if you need anything. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere unless we're not all going to be able to determine when and where we're going to go. But as long as I got a fight in me, I'm going to stick around for a while. So let me know if you ever need anything.
Good deal. And I certainly will. Hang tight. I'm going to wrap things up with you off recording. So.
Okay.